Let's jump to the final film, which is me. Ordet, which means the word in English, is a 1955 drama directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer. It is set on a farm in rural Denmark, and it tells the story of the Morgen family. The devout widower Morten is the patriarch. His eldest son, Mikkel, has no faith, but is happily married to the pious Iga, who is pregnant with their third child. Morten's middle child, Johannes, has recently suffered a mental breakdown and believes himself to be Jesus Christ. Morten's youngest son, Anders, is lovesick for the daughter of a rival family. Ordet is a very slow and somber film, and I confess I was a little unengaged in the first act. However, I thought the filmmaker very skillfully draws you into the world and this family, and about halfway through I found myself caring for the characters and really moved by what they go through. The performances are all excellent, especially the actor who plays Morten. Another absorbing element of the film is the cinematography, which consists of long takes that swim around the set as the drama unfolds. Despite the simplicity of the plot and the sparseness of the sets, the film offers a unique exploration of family, religion, and faith, and boasts a genuinely suspenseful and shocking ending. So, what did you guys think of Ordet?
I think it was a really interesting, very moving movie. As you said, it was difficult to get engaged to begin with because there was no real action or anything. It was just people talking. Like we needed to see the characters and what they were about. And they're not exceptional or extravagant in any way. They live the simple life in Western Jutland, which is for the choice of location. It's very, very poignant because in that area you would have very barren soil, that would be the place where you live the hard life, which also breeds more extreme Christianity and stuff like that. So it's very poignant, the choice of being in that area, Western Jutland. Also, I know that the playwright Carl something. He also came from there, but in general, it's a very poignant choice, and I think it's very good. And I got very much drawn in at the end, especially about the way the heart of the group, the family, Inga. She losing her would certainly spell the doom for the family. So it was, you're sort of rooting for her to come back so that you would have so that the family could survive, I think.
I read a poignant bit of trivia about the original playwright, Karl Munck, I think his name was, who was killed by the Nazis after they invaded Denmark, and he spoke out against Hitler. And the Gestapo basically kidnapped him and killed him and left him in a field. And several points in the film, they're riding a carriage or riding a horse along a track in the field, and they pass a cross. And apparently that's the actual cross where Karl Munck's body was found, but after being murdered.
Yeah, he's actually become like a patron saint in Denmark afterwards, Karl Munck. He did write a lot of Christian plays about morality and stuff like that, and did a lot, like him and actually a person who was mentioned as one of the faiths, one of the sects the Morgen family follows, Grundtvig. Those two are pretty influential in the modern way of thinking Christianity. So yeah, it's a very meaningful choice to have him represented in the filmatization of his play, because this is Kai Munck's play, just filmatized.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily cut and dry about its depiction of Christianity. Like, I guess you could argue the ending is an argument that, Christianity is the correct belief because that's ultimately what resurrects Iga. But it felt like it sympathized with all of the characters. Like, all of the characters, even when they're in conflict with one another, are complex and flawed, and they have their own beliefs and their own convictions, and they're really just trying to do what's right according to their interpretation of the world. And some characters are atheists, some characters are sort of Christian, but a bit more liberal. Some characters are a bit more conservative. Some believe they are Jesus Christ. But it's really, I felt like it showed religion as this way of trying to make sense of the world and trying to make sense of a world that is often really hard. You talked about the place they're living. It's a really hard place to live, and really hard events that don't make sense. Like, why would such a moral and kind person like Iga lose her child, lose her life? That what kind of God would allow that? How do you make sense of that? So I felt like it was an interesting exploration of believing in something despite hardship, believing in something to make sense of hardship, and the sort of the ways that religion can create conflict between people, the sectarianism that divides families, that divides communities. I thought that was interesting as well. And just the pain of trying to make sense of the world and trying to do the right thing despite, hard circumstances. I thought was really moving, very, very humane depiction of people. Did you get a chance to see the film, Bina?
Yes, I did. First time I watched it was in a cinema, proper celluloid, and it was, I think, worth seeing because, like Patrick, I did struggle a bit with engaging with the characters and the emotional and, I guess, ideological arc of it, because I think in a way those religious debates and struggles, if you're not religious, and we live in a different time, right, from when this was written, or maybe we don't actually, given America. Maybe this is very relevant for some people. It just felt very far from my own experience, so I found it quite hard to empathise with some of the struggles that were going on. But I think why it's rightly acclaimed, right? Like if you read polls of critics' polls of the best films of all time or whatever, this is often like in the top 10 or top 20 films of all time. And I think the reason is probably because of the cinematography. And I think it looks luscious. And we watched it together, actually, and we managed to get a 4K restoration on disc, which was not cheap, but it's so worth it. I mean, the way the framing is done, and it reminded me almost of a kind of a proto Stanley Kubrick, like films like Barry Lyndon, where the framing is so deliberate and what is appearing in the shot is so deliberate that it's just stunning to look at. I mean, the setups are amazing. And I feel I was watching there was a little sort of accompanying documentary on the disc that said that the way he shot it, which no one would do now because it's so expensive, is he would block the action in the morning and then just literally shoot one setup every afternoon. And that at the time it was common to have 2 or 3 lights on set, and he would have 20. So like just real meticulous care to how it looked. And the other thing that shocked me was he didn't use a light finder. So he just did it all by eye. Like he didn't use a little widget. Sometimes if you see people making films, they've got this little thing they put to their eyes to sort of like figure out exactly what the light levels are as a cinematographer. So I just think of its time, technically it's so audacious and it looks so beautiful. And I think it's just, to sound really pretentious, I think it's like an important film, and I'm really glad you picked it. But tough going. I think I think another round is tough, especially we should have put a trigger warning. If you've got experience of alcoholism in your family, it's tough. But this is tough in a different way for modern audiences. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Glad you picked
it. It kind of, I know this sounds weird, but it feels like an old movie, both in its themes and its style. And it has, at least in the beginning, it feels very uncinematic, the way we think about cinema. The characters are not very emotional initially. They're just going about this very humdrum existence. It's a lot of it takes place in this one kitchen/dining area. It's very sparsely decorated. They're not making these big proclamations. There's not these major conflicts that we associate with cinematic drama. Obviously, it becomes more dramatic because it's all character focused and because it does all of that establishing of the characters' motivations. But in another way, I mean, when you think about the technicalities of what the directors actually achieved, it is amazing. The fact that you're almost like another person in that room. Like there's very few cuts. They're all medium shots. You're basically just sitting there looking from character to character. as it unfolds. You feel like you're in that room, and the framing, like if you think about what must have been achieved, like because sometimes the camera is following the characters, but sometimes it's almost like the characters are following the camera, like the frame moves ahead of them and they enter it, or vice versa, and it all just seems to flow like this amazingly choreographed ballet. But it doesn't feel labored in any sense. It feels remarkably smooth, like you're just like a human gaze wandering around the room. It's really effective, I found.
I also want to mention that that some of the outside shots sort of reminded me of the way Akira Kurosawa also shoots his movies. Very much a wind theme, and like this is the nature being part of the storytelling. I got transported very close to very quickly into like Seven Samurais in the way they use wind and the grass and everything here as well. It's very, very well shot also on the outside shots.
Yeah, that's a good point. The wind has a big presence in the film, and it adds to this sort of, I don't know, this feeling of unease or this feeling of existential angst. Like there's sort of this, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it makes
it's sort of like the spirit of the area. And it's a hard life. It's the spirit embodies this area embodies the people there. The two old men who've lived here for a long time, created their life. They see life this hard thing that they've had to endure for a long time to cement their legacy and their faith into another generation, and they want to secure that because they are the keepers of what is meaningful for them and for what they think is meaningful for the area, for the next generations. It's very, poignant.
Yeah, and you feel that hardship of their lives and the fact that they don't have great wealth necessarily. They don't have riches or whatever you want to call it, or power, but they have their faith, and their faith is what has allowed them to survive in this harsh place. And they're sticking to it, and it's very much as it's helped them, it's kind of trapped them in a way and separated them from each other and kept them entombed in these little fortresses of belief. But yeah, the wind definitely just evokes this sparseness and this emptiness and this sense of scarcity. Yeah.
I don't know how much we want to go into it, but the place specifically is known for its poor soil, and it's sort of the way it was made is because of last ice age. All the sand and stuff that it went and ended up in this area, so it's very sandy, very very coarse dirt, and on top of that, people used to and still do burn the fields down so that they can sow whatever how much fertility there is there. So it's very much a like human influenced landscape that sort of talks to the whole like an older sort of outdated way of looking at nature. It's very specifically poignant that the Western Jutland has been chosen as the scene, the area for this location for this. It's very good, very good. I can keep on to talk about the area itself.
Yeah, no, thanks, Patrick. That's a really, really valuable insight.